Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back on Sport Vitamins for episode 45. As I promised last week, today's episode is a true Christmas gift for all the listeners out there. Today's guest is none other than Dr. Nijem Ramsey. Coach Ramsey was named Men's Basketball Director of Sport Performance at Kansas University in September of 2019. Prior to that, he was the NBA's youngest head strength and conditioning coach, directing strength and conditioning, sports science, and nutrition for the Sacramento Kings. Coach Ramsey is also the creator of the Applied Performance Coach course, a 12-week certification course and mentorship program that focuses on three pillars of growth: content expertise, coaching practices, and career development. I took this course last winter, and it's arguably one of the best, if not the best, course I've ever taken over my career. You can find the link in the description. And if you decide to apply for the 2023 winter cohort, please use the code Roberto Yezi at checkout. So guys, without further ado, here's my Christmas present for you, episode 45 with Dr. Nijem Ramsey. Coach, good morning. Welcome on Sport Vitamins. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to be here and finally chat. And obviously, we've been trying to make this happen for a while. So I'm glad we're here, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a great honor to have you on today. Usually I start with asking my guest about their background.
Yeah, of course. I could jump right into it. Long story short, strength and conditioning coach. Really, I like to just say I'm a coach these days. Strength and conditioning is just kind of the vehicle that I use to create impact. Currently with the University of Kansas men's basketball program here in the United States. I was previously with the Sacramento Kings in the NBA. Spent 5 years there. And then beyond all that, I've got a doctorate degree in sport performance. I have a coaching course and kind of mentorship program, which is called the Applied Performance Coach. And that's been an incredible kind of community we're building there with coaches from all over the world that are just kind of striving to get better and grow together and support each other and create impact. So just really passionate about the space and the industry and helping, obviously the athletes I work with, but also trying to help as many people as I can through the coaching program. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Okay, Coach. By the way, your mentorship program is highly recommended, guys. So check it out. And
I appreciate that.
Coach, being one of the youngest NBA strength coaches, what was the biggest challenge that you faced in your during that time?
Yeah, it was kind of a unique position I was in. So I was an assistant in the NBA when I was 23 years old. So, I was fresh out of a master's program. I started my doctorate, got an incredible opportunity to work in the NBA at 23 years old. And going into that role as the assistant, there was some learning curves. I had to learn how to be patient and create buy-in and build trust with athletes and all of those things that we know we have to do when we first kind of accept a role. But because I did that for 2 years, when I became the head strength coach, I was 25 years old and was, again, fortunate to get the head role with the Sacramento Kings. A lot of the people in the organization knew me already. A lot of the players that we had, they knew me already. So the unique challenges that might have been present if I was brand new were already overcome because I was an assistant for 2 years. So things like buy-in, things like trust, things like getting your sports medicine staff or front office or coaching staff to believe in what you can deliver and the value that you can impart on an organization, though all those boxes were already checked because of the previous kind of 24 months. So I was kind of fortunate in that regard that as soon as I stepped into the head role, I overcame some of the challenges that you might face when you take on a new position. And then once I jumped into that role, we were moving to a new arena. So my first big project was building an entire new weight room in our new arena. And that was a really fun opportunity. Obviously, the first time I had a chance to do that. I had to hire a staff. So I hired an assistant. I hired a G League coach. We brought in an intern. So we kind of built a high performance kind of space around the weight room, around the staff that was supporting that. Brought in some consultants for sports psych, brought in a consultant from dietitian or nutrition side. And so those were the challenges that I faced as far as the role goes when I got the head job. They weren't kind of the ones that you might think as far as creating buy-in, building trust. It was more tactical of, how are we going to build this weight room? How are we going to build this staff? How are we going to create a high performance environment within this organization? And I'm 25 years old and trying to do this. So it was a unique and exciting opportunity, and obviously certainly glad that I was able to do that.
What are some recommendations that you will give to the listeners as far as designing a weight room?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things come to mind. The first one you gotta probably think about are the movements and the exercises that you think are important, right? And the implements you think are important. So if you're a big kettlebell guy, you're probably gonna want to find some space, some storage for a bunch of kettlebells because that's your thing, right? If you think that conditioning is really important, then maybe you need a cardio bullpen where you have some VersaClimbers and bikes and treadmills, right? If you think that platforms in Olympic weightlifting are more important, you're probably going to need some, more platform space. So I think that first you got to think about your own philosophy. And then beyond that, I think you got to think of the logistics and the flow of the weight room. Is your weight room typically going to cater to 15 plus people, an entire team? Or in my setting in the NBA, we cater to, anywhere from 3 to 5 guys at a time because it was a more smaller group or one-on-one. So I think you got to think about kind of your philosophy and then the logistics and the workflow of your space and your weight room. And then I think the third level to that, it's like culture, right? And so, when we were at the Kings, our team colors, obviously purple, white, black, gray. But I really wanted a space that felt real modern, felt real clean, but also felt like kind of a space that athletes wanted to come into. It felt a little rugged. It felt clean, but it felt like a workspace. So we went with like all black everything. Even our turf was black. So everything was black. And then we sprinkled in hints of purple to obviously remind everyone who we are. But little things like that I think are important. So for me, it's always like philosophy first, what's important to you. And then workflow and logistics. And those are like context specific, right? Is it the whole team? Is it 2 to 3 people at a time? What's the workflow around that? And then culture, kind of that third layer as you sprinkle on different elements, right? What's going to be on the walls? To me, I always think about, and I just built a new weight room here with Kansas, and it was the same thought process. And so the cultural items, as beyond the color of some of the equipment, the things you're going to put on your walls, the kind of messaging you want to deliver, some of that isn't as urgent because sometimes you want to move. But I always say you want to move into your house before you worry about what paintings you're going to put on the walls. And so culture to me is kind of the decor that makes your house the home, but you got to make sure the house is what you want first. And that to me is philosophy and kind of workflow and logistics. And then obviously sprinkling your cultural items, what's the color scheme? What's the messaging? Are there quotes? Are there big names that are within your organization that are important, right? If you work for the Chicago Bulls and you build a weight room, you're probably going to want to have some things around the trophies and around Michael Jordan and those ideas, right? So I think it's important to appreciate the history of your program. And same thing here at Kansas. We built a beautiful weight room. It's modern. We got some tech in there. It feels high end. But then we sprinkle in some cool cultural things, right? Our lights change colors, and that's a fun kind of vibe that we can create. The wall that we have that backdrops the whole space is a fun kind of portrait, kind of pays homage to the history of the program. So you never want to forget the history of your program. Because what you never want to do is create a space that when you leave, people don't appreciate, right? And I've always thought in those regards, I want to build a space that even if I'm not here, people say, wow, this is a really great weight room. And I think I've been able to do that in Sacramento and here as well.
Is there any difference between NBA and NCAA as far as establishing culture?
Yeah, I mean, big differences. Obviously, in college, there's a precedent for the culture and for kind of how culture can impact winning games. And I think in the NBA, culture is obviously important, but talent is really important in the NBA. You need talent. You can have a culture of excellence and a culture of winning. You look at a team like the Lakers, obviously, they have a culture of excellence and winning. But they always manage to have the best players, right? And so I think it's important to appreciate that. In the NBA, it's more talent-based. And in the college setting, I think culture can drive the win-loss column a little bit more. In college, it's driven more by your head coach. Your head coach is going to lead, kind of be the leader of almost all things. I would say in college, your head coach is the equivalent of your president, ownership group, the general manager, and your head coach. And in the NBA, obviously, you would have an owner, you would have a front office, you would have a head coach. So you have more people involved. And And we always say, no one's bigger than the program. And so I think that that's important because in college, there's an expectation that I'm going to work my ass off every day because no one's bigger than the program. And you haven't made it to the NBA yet. So those are some of the things that come to mind for sure. And then obviously the NBA, I mean, there's all the other differences around. You play 82 games. There's an extended, obviously, playoffs. Usually the best team wins because it's a playoff series where you have to win 4 games to move on. And in college, it's 1 game. So if you just have a bad game, you could lose. So the best teams don't always win because you can have a bad game. And if you lose, you're out of the tournament. If a team that is not as good as you, but they just get hot at the right time, right, then they can beat you 1 game. An injury may occur. So, those are the things that come to mind. But in general, I think that because of the college culture, because of the way that it's driven by a head coach and the way that it's a 1-game elimination tournament, there's a lot of differences in kind of the expectations and how you actually win. Whereas in the NBA, there's so many games and it's 4-game elimination that if you have better players over time, you're probably going to end up winning more games. And for the most part, that bears out, right? You look at every year, the teams that are the best in the regular season find a way typically to make it, a deep run in the playoffs.
Very interesting. You mentioned one word, which is talent. I would like to know, what is talent for you? And how do you select talent when it comes to creating a coaching staff?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. I don't really do much as far as selecting coaching staff or anything like that. I don't even do the recruiting here. We're involved in that process, but I'm not a recruiting coach. So it's not my job to figure out who can help us win games in the future. But as far as talent goes, I think there's kind of 2 levels to what someone might classify as talent, right? One level is what someone might say is someone, an athlete's innate ability, what maybe was given to them. So if you were born and you're 6'10" now, you didn't really do anything to become 6'10". Your parents had you and your genetics played a role and you're 6'10". And if you're 6'10" and you can tie your shoes, you probably have a chance to be a Division I basketball player. And if you could dunk the basketball and make a left-hand layup, you might be an NBA player, right? Like if you're just a tall human being, there's a good chance that you'll find success in basketball. But that, is that talent? I don't know. You didn't do anything for that. So I think talent it is an abstract idea, right? It's like, is it the person who maybe wasn't given as much, but they worked their tail off and now they're very good at basketball? Or is that talent? I'm not sure, but I think, at a very superficial level, you say talent is someone who's very good at their sport and they find a way to find success in that. And for some guys, it means they got to work their butt off, right? That Kobe Bryant mentality. And for other guys, it could mean that you're just very good and maybe you don't even work that hard, but you happen to be incredible, right? And so, there's guys that I think that come to mind, right? Like Kyrie Irving is so talented at basketball, and he probably also works very hard. It's clear to me that he's so much better than people at basketball, right? Like he's a top NBA talent, even if he takes months off from the game, right? Or you think, we just had this discussion yesterday. It's like Michael Jordan retired from the NBA and he came back and like in his first game, he had 50 points. And it's like, wow, you're so much better than other people. So, I could talk about the idea forever, but I don't think I have a concrete answer of what talent really is. But I think ideally what it is someone who was fortunate to be given the tools to be successful and then finds a way to work very hard to maximize their potential. Like to me, that's what I think about when I think of optimizing talent. It's whatever your potential is, how close can you get to that? And I tell my guys that here all the time, I don't know your ceiling. I don't know if you can go to the NBA. But I know that if you work your butt off every single day, whatever your potential is, you'll reach it. And that's ultimately what we want from athletes. I want you to become the very best version of yourself. And for some players, that's an NBA All-Star. For other players, that's just an NBA role player. And for other players, it might be to go overseas in Europe and play at a very high level and get paid a lot of money for 10 years. And for other players, your potential may just be that you have a really good college career and then you need to go get a really good job and kind of live a more traditional life. So, to me, talent, I guess with all that said, is talent is the person who can reach their potential. And typically that means that they work very hard with the tools that they were given.
And how important is, in your opinion, to have a mentor to get to that potential, whether you're a strength coach, a coach, or an athlete?
I think it's critical. You know, it's probably the very reason why I started, you know, the applied performance coaching program. I sit back and reflect on the quote unquote success I've had in my coaching career. And undoubtedly, you know, do I think I worked hard? Sure. Do I think that I read a lot of research and I try to make sure I know the knowledge that's required? Sure. But we all do those things, right? If you're passionate and you care about your job, you're going to do those things. So the reality is the reason why I was able to land in the NBA early is because a mentor took a chance on me. The reason why I was given the head job is because when the guy who hired me, a mentor of mine, when he left, another mentor of mine said, "Hey man, I think you're ready for this job." And I was 25 years old, right? And the way I ended up at Kansas was because when I was with the Sacramento Kings, a scout that worked with us watched me work every day. And he thought that I was, you know, quote unquote talented at my job, and he recommended me to coach here. So um, I haven't got a single place in life without a mentor or a friend or somebody giving me assistance. And I think that the world just works that way. And I think it's very positive, right? Like it's a very positive quality because it means that your success is not just dependent on what you can do, it's dependent on the community you build around yourself and what they can do for you. And they always say, you know, it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, I think it takes a village to be successful for the most part, right? If you're, I don't know, a rare person that is you know, Elon Musk comes to mind. I know he's a controversial topic, right? But unless you're like a person like that, where you can go and create 5 companies and run them all and never sleep, like most of us don't operate at that level. Most of us need a helping hand, and I'm no different. And it's exactly why I started the coaching program, right? We have coaches in the NBA now and coaches overseas, and we're getting coaches in the MLB now, and all these things, and it's simply because we're just trying to help each other out. So, man, I think it's probably more important actually than even knowing the knowledge of this stuff, right? I think the community around you is probably the most important thing.
Got it. Coach, I would like to know something about how important it is to be a mentor for your athletes, and how do the power dynamics change between NBA and college?
Yeah, good question. And in college, I think that there's an expectation that you will be some version of a mentor to your athletes, because in college, to segue to the power dynamics, in college, there is kind of a hierarchy where the strength coach is more of an authoritarian position, right? You're expected to tell athletes what to do, and they're expected to do it. In the NBA, you're not an authority position. You're more of a peer. And so because you're more of a peer to peer relationship, you're not necessarily a mentor. On top of that, those players are typically older, right? When I look at an NBA roster, you might say, in general, a third of your roster is under the age of 25, a third of your roster is from the age 25 to 30, and then the final third of your roster is above the age 30. So, you know, you might go 5 players under the age of 25, 5 players are 26 to 30, and then 5 players are 30 and beyond. And so, you know, for me, I'm 25 years old as the head strength coach of the team. It's going to be hard for me to mentor people that are older than me, let alone my peers, because the things that they deal with, I can't even relate to, right? I don't know what it feels like to be a 23-year-old NBA player with millions of dollars. So me trying to preach life to them is not going to work very well. I think that you can find moments of impact and influence, because when I think of what a mentor is, I think it's somebody who can impact and influence your way in a positive way, right? I think you can find those things in the NBA in a peer-to-peer relationship, but it's much easier and expected in a college setting where you're more of an authority position. I'm older than my players. My players are 18 to 22 years old. I'm 31. I'm older than them. I have more life experience than them. I've gone through things that they haven't gone through, but that they will soon go through, right? Things like taxes, things like buying your first house, things like relationships, right? I'm not a father, but certainly some of our coaches are fathers, so they can talk about fatherhood and those items. So yeah, in college, there's an expectation for mentorship, and in the NBA, just it's not expected, but you could find moments to have mentorship moments of influence.
And can you give us some tips on how to, let's say, be a leadership figure in a professional setting when you're, like you said, you're younger than your athletes? Because I guess most of our listeners are young strength coaches, and some of them also have the chance to work with some professional teams. And
Yeah.
I can definitely relate with what you said because, for example, this is my first season with only two players that are older than me. And I think that when these two guys will retire, I'm going to be finally older than my players. But it never been like that, before
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. I think it's not just to our players, like when I think of my time throughout my career, um, for the Kings, I had a staff. I had an assistant strength coach, I had a G League strength coach, and I had an intern who were all older than me. And so the same kind of things come to mind. If I'm expected to bring some type of leadership to them or to our unit, or to our players, it's like, well, I'm younger than all of you. So how do you lead? Not, I think leadership starts with you being in front, right? You lead from the front. If you expect someone to do the work, you do the work. If you expect someone to be on time, you be on time. If you expect someone to care about the small little details, like flipping our dumbbell so that all the logos are up and vertical and the weight room looks spotless all the time, you do those things. You flip those dumbbells. You clean the weight room. And what ends up happening, regardless of age, is people want to follow and they want to do those things as well because they care and you care. And together it becomes a team rather than you're their boss. And so I think leadership is more so like a point guard analogy of the NBA, right? Or of basketball in general. I want to be more of a point guard. I want to be a team player. I want you to know I got your back. I want you to know that I'm going to work just as hard as you. And I'm here to assist as a point guard would. I want to create opportunities for you to succeed, right? A point guard is expected to get into the thick of the defense, get a paint touch, draw in the defense, kick out to an open shooter and make an open shot. And so you're expected to create opportunities for your teammates to find success. And leadership to me is the exact same thing. You're expected to create opportunities and to help other people be successful. Sometimes it's in their careers and sometimes it's just in their roles, right? Like, hey, you're the assistant strength coach. I'm the head strength coach. I want to help you be successful in your role. How do I do that? I'm going to tell you exactly what I expect from you. I'm going to hold you accountable to those expectations. And we're all going to end up elevating the program. So yeah, when I think of leadership, the point guard analogy comes to mind. I want to create opportunities for other people to succeed, and then I want to help them succeed. And then certainly when they fail to do what's expected, I have to hold them accountable, just like I hope my point guard does to our team, right? So it's the same thing.
Interesting. Coach, let's switch gears and let's talk about strength and conditioning now. I would like to know, first of all, how your philosophy in the weight room have evolved over the years.
Yeah, good question. I think early in my career, I was a more traditional strength coach. I think I thought the value of what I was bringing was in my programming every day, was in my coaching every day. And so, we lifted heavy more often because I thought that lifting heavy and driving intensity would create the adaptation that was important for sport. We did probably more work back then, more volume, because I thought that, the more volume, the more I can drive the tissues into the floor, the more of an adaptive response would occur. I was probably more firm in my expectations because I thought that the way that you drive culture was more of an authority, militant type approach of my way or the highway. And now when I think of my programming, right, it's more flexible in nature. We do less, but we're more impactful with it. We measure more and we try to be more specific about what we're doing and why we're doing it. I communicate those things way more now than I used to do to my players. My players know exactly why we're doing something, and that ultimately drives more buy-in. And then I think that I, at the end of the day, view my weight room as a means to an end from a culture of you're going to work hard. You're going to have a hit first mentality, right? Lifting heavy weights used to mean to me that you can create a lot of force. Lifting heavy weights now means that you can create a lot of intent, and that will transfer to the basketball court. There's an intent to get a rebound. There's an intent to get position on the post. There's an intent to drive force into the ground because you need to move faster, because you need to stay in front of your the offensive player. So to me, those things come to mind. The movements themselves, right? If you talk to X's and O's, the movements haven't changed much. We're going to squat, we're going to hinge, we're going to split squat, we're going to lunge, we're going to bridge, we're going to push, we're going to pull, we're going to do some core work. Like those things haven't changed much because exercise science hasn't changed necessarily that much over the past 5 years. But the way that I view what I'm doing, I think has changed a lot. Especially in season, we definitely do less now than ever before. We're just very intentional about what we're going to do and what we want to get out of it. So yeah, that comes to mind, when I think about that question.
Yeah, how important it is to have players that work with intent and that are, let's say, present in the moment, and they are able to give you the right feedback during the weightlifting session.
Yeah, absolutely. It's to me, it's a game changer, really. The same player who may not be bought in, may not really know why he's doing something, may be distracted. He can do that for 8 weeks and not get anything out of your program. And then he comes in one day, and for whatever reason, there's a flip, there's a mindset shift, and now he's intentional, he's interested, he's curious about why he's doing something, he wants to know how it transfers to his performance. He buys in, he works hard, no rep is wasted. The same program now has a very different effect, right? It's very impactful. The results will speak for themselves. And we see that with guys. I mean, just this past summer, I put 10 pounds on a player of muscle, and his vert went from 42 inches to 44 inches. So he went from freak to mega freak. And he just buys in. That same program would not do anything for a player who wasn't bought in, right? And so it's not what's on the piece of paper or whatever means you have to give them their program, whether it's an iPad or whatever. That's not what's going to deliver the results. It's the coaching and it's the athlete buy-in. And when you get those two things, the results are going to occur it's almost like, a guarantee that you'll find success if you have a good program and a player who's bought into that.
Got it. Coach, let's talk about game days. Is there anything that you do and that you like to do with your athletes on game days to have an impact on the game itself?
Not much anymore. In the NBA, we used to lift on game days, especially pregame. We used to lift a lot pregame. I think of a guy like Buddy Hield or Bogdan Bogdanovic. Those guys, they lifted before games. And it was more of a primer, but it was part of their game day routine. It was almost like an extended warm up. But we were trap bar deadlifting 225 for some triples fast, right? And in college, we don't lift on game days here. I know some schools may, but we don't. You only play twice a week. We train 4 to 5 times a week sometimes, so I don't need those 2 other days necessarily from an adaptation perspective. And our game day schedule is so packed that, trying to sneak in some work might be hard. And then the facilities and access to those facilities are a little bit different in college. And then finally, in the NBA, you'll get to a game 3 hours before a game, 2 hours before a game. I mean, your final bus is going to arrive, no less than 90 minutes before a game. So everybody's in the building. And in college, we don't get into the gym until 75 minutes or so before the game. We basically get off the bus, tie our shoes, and get right to our warm-up, our pregame routine. So there's just far less time. So all of those things kind of have influenced my thinking to where now, once game day has arrived, I've done all that I can do for the team. At that point, it's scouting report and focus, and obviously we have a Hall of Fame coach and the staff that can get that done. So the only thing I do on game days is I warm the team up for the most part.
Got it. And as far as the day after the game, how do you periodize your recovery strategies?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes if it's a full off day, sometimes they won't actually do anything depending on kind of how many games we've been going in a row or how many days we've been going in a row. But more traditionally, when we come in the day after a game, it'll be a shorter session, right? 30 minutes or so. We'll start with some lower body kind of floor-based mobility where they take themselves through a routine that I've created for them. We just call it lower body series. They know that routine. Some things for the quads, hamstrings, and hips, calves, those types of things. And then we try to load movement in, when I think of my recovery days, it's lighter movement, it's loaded movement, and it's out of the sagittal plane. So we try to get more into the frontal or transverse planes just to promote more movement in general, right? Typically, we spend a lot of time in the sagittal plane, either bilateral or unilateral work. And on recovery days, we're going to get outside the sagittal plane and we're going to promote some of that frontal and transverse actions with some rotation. So even if we're going to do like a seated cable lat pull down, then I might go one arm at a time to create some thoracic rotation and mobility, right? So I sneak in little things like that, and my players don't know why I'm doing that. But to me, those are, in that moment, I'm not too interested about how much weight is on this cable stack, right? We're doing it to promote movement and fluidity. And so I basically think of all those different things on our recovery days. But the goal of a recovery day is that you're going to feel better after the lift than you did when it started. And that's not always the case after a traditional lift. There's times where you come in for a traditional lift and you feel tired after, you feel fatigued, you feel a little beat up, right? And that's okay, because that's part of a periodized plan, and we're thinking of a super compensation or adaptation long term. But in a recovery session, it's an acute thought process of, I want to make you feel better 30 minutes from now.
That's very interesting. And coach, don't you think that nowadays most athletes recover too much? I mean, they're too focused on recovery and they don't work hard enough.
Man, you took the words out of my mouth. I get more people are worried about whoop bands, Oura rings, and cryotherapy than they are being consistent with their training, increasing, the SED principle, the progressive overload principles. So yeah, I do think in general, there's a hyper focus on recovery that's probably not justified because there's not a hyper focus on training, right? And so I'm not saying it's bad to worry about recovery. Certainly we need to, but the reality is, from a recovery perspective, if you're eating enough calories, if you're getting enough sleep, and you're hydrating during competition and after, you're probably as recovered as you need to be. If you're a little sore, that just means that the soreness and fatigue the next day, that just tells me that you've done more acutely than you were ready for chronically, right? And that goes into like those workload ideas, but that's all that means. So if you want to fix that problem, you need to fix your program. And certainly acutely, you can do things like cold tubs or contrast baths or compression garments or massage guns, or actually get a masseuse to come in, or what, you can do all of those things because they'll make you feel better acutely. But if that's all you're doing and that's all you're relying on, you're probably going to end up in a bad position months down the road, right? Like, I want to make sure that our program is in a good spot. I want to make sure that you're eating enough food. I want to make sure that you're hydrating, and I want to make sure that you're sleeping enough. And if we have a really good program and you're sleeping enough and eating enough and hydrating enough, then we're talking about maybe a 5% difference max when you talk about all the other things that, when you talk about recovery, most people think of, again, whoop bands, Oura rings, those things can help maybe 1 to 5%. But if you don't have a good program, sleep and nutrition, then who cares? So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. A lot of times it happens also with professional athletes that, for example, their Oura ring, their compression garments, their massage, their foam rollers are on point, but their nutrition and sleep are not. Like, for example, hey, coach, I think I need to recover better. I did all those things, but I still feel tired. How many hours did you sleep last night? 3. Right. What did you eat? I went to McDonald's. Okay, so what are we talking about?
Yeah, no doubt. And I get it, right? Like, it's easy to tell someone to get in a cold tub. It's easy to get a massage gun. It's easy to put compression garments on. Those things are easy. It's much harder to sleep 9 hours. It's much harder to pick high quality food, and it's much harder to actually train consistently for months so that your body's actually prepared for the work that's to come. Those are harder. So people default to the easy decision of, hey, coach, can I foam roll? It's like, yeah, you can foam roll, but you probably should start training hard, right? Like, that's probably what you need to do, but that's hard to do.
And yeah, we just talked about recovery for athletes. Can you give us some tips about recovery for coaches? Because also coaches need to recover, and probably they need to recover more than athletes, because sometimes we just need to decompress from this hectic life that we live.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I always say you can't pour from an empty cup, and we're in the energy giving industry, right? Like, it's our jobs to give our energy every day to other people. And the hope is that when you get home at night, you find a way to recover and fill your cup so that when you wake up the next morning, your passion is there, your flame is lit, and you're ready to go out and do it again. And so, but burnout is a real thing, right? There's a lot of coaches who just, they get to a point where it's like, man, I don't have any more to give. I don't enjoy it anymore. I'm watching the clock every day. I check in and can't wait to get out, right? And so, yeah, I think it's important that coaches do recover. And I think, those are probably more abstract ideas of like, understand your why, right? Why are you doing this every single day? Understand the impact that you're having, understand your values, right? What's important to you. And then obviously I think just trying to keep your passion lit, right? If you're passionate about what you do, then you need to feed that passion, right? So for me, it's like if I go a few days without reading a research paper, I got obviously, hundreds of them on my computer saved in like to read folders. I'll just pop one open. Sometimes I don't even read the title. I just double click whatever pops up. Let's dive into this a little bit, because in almost anything you read, you can pull out something, right? And so it's like sometimes if I feel like, man, I haven't been locked in recently, let me get back to it. Open up a research paper, and after 10 minutes, I'm like, yo, this is interesting. I never thought about this. And then that turns into, I'll text somebody, hey, what do you think about this? And then that's a way for me to continually engage with my passion. I think that's important for sure. So yeah, when it comes to recovery for coaches, it's probably not Normatex and cryo chambers, but it's probably higher level items like know your why, know your values, feed your passion, because you got to fill your cup, because we're expected to pour out every day. And it's, the job that we decided to do, and we obviously all love it. But it's important to protect it as well.
And I do make sure to keep filling your cup as far as education.
Yeah, I mean, that's, there's a million things there. Now that I have the coaching course, I almost feel obligated to continue to read and make sure that if there's new ideas or new topics that, I'm thinking about them. I have, lectures on my computer that people have never seen, because if I go down a rabbit hole of a topic, what my cheat code is, I create lectures on them because I'm teaching myself. And then I read through those a few times, and then I get to a point where I'm ready to teach that to other people, and then we'll deliver that out. And so, yeah, I mean, it starts with the research always, but I'm on social media just like the next guy, right? So there's stuff there that I like to follow. I'm on Twitter like the next guy. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts anymore on training. I'm at this weird, I think, stage of my life where I'm 31 now. So, higher levels of I don't know if it's thinking or just, ideas are coming to my mind, things like clarity and peace and purpose and impact. And so love, like those items are really high on my list right now. So I find myself really being drawn to that type of content. So as far as kind of audio or visual stuff, there's not much, but definitely research, and social media and blog posts and then conversations like this, right? Like we've had in the past, or we're having now, and with other coaches. I have a call tonight with my guy who was one of my assistants, and he's with the Golden State Warriors. It's like tonight we have a plan to hop on a phone, and I've sent him a few things that I'm interested in talking about. He sent me a few things, and so tonight we'll deep dive. So it's all of those things that help me make sure that flame is just, I think you got to stoke it. Your passion in me is a flame, and like all flames, it can burn out. And so it's your job to kind of kindle that flame, but make sure you throw some firewood on that. And it doesn't have to be every day, but once or twice a month, like how are you putting that firewood down so that there's always something to burn? Because if not, it burns out. And that's what, burnout is a real thing. People quit their jobs. And so for me, I'm always thinking, what am I throwing into that fire to make sure it's burning?
Interesting. Coach, you just mentioned your APC program. Would you like to tell us something about it?
Yeah, I mean, you've been part of it. And, the first thing I would like to say on it is that it's grown to be a community that is something way more special than I thought it could be. I always tell people I'm not good at sales, right? Like, it's a cohort model. Coaches come through it together. Once I close it, I close it. And there's no way to get involved until the next one. And so, to me, what's important to highlight is that it's just a community of coaches that are learning and growing and connecting and supporting and being vulnerable together. Like, it's such a special thing. It's just yesterday I have a phone call with a coach and we talked for an hour, and I'm helping through I helped him get an opportunity And we were very excited about that. And he's 8 weeks in, and now he's struggling with some different things. And so it's like, I need to help him get through those things and understand the big picture. Or I get a text yesterday. It's crazy, man. I get a text from a coach who talks about, this past year has been tough, and he spent some time reflecting, and, he wants to thank me and it's like, man, that's so cool. So that doesn't help anyone understand the course. And I know that, right? Like, that's not tactical at all. So, top level stuff, it's a 12-week course. Every week we switch topics. To me, it's very comprehensive. We're going to go through everything that is important in sport performance. It's actually like 16 weeks because there's bonus weeks that I provide. We meet once a week to lecture and talk and connect and do Q&As. There's readings, there's assignments, there's videos. I try to really leave no stone unturned, and then I try to be very transparent. There's no secrets I have. When people ask me a question, I tell them what I do exactly. Everything that I do, people are going to hear about and they're going to know. It's not my goal to hide anything, because I think I used to, when I was younger, I had what I would call a scarcity mindset. And what I mean by that is I would be afraid at times to give out knowledge, because I would think, well, if you know what I know, you can come and like take my job. And now what I have is this abundance mindset of, there's enough in this world for all of us to find success and peace and love. And if I can help the next person achieve that, great. I'm not worried about anyone ever taking my spot. And instead, I want to help other people elevate. And I firmly believe in this quote, which is, a rising tide raises all boats. And so I think that if I can help raise everybody, how would that ever hurt me? And what I've come to realize now that I'm 30 is it will never hurt me. And so that's why I do what I do, man. So that's the course. Again, it's a cohort model. The next one will start right after the new year in January. And then we'll go from there. And now we're going to do an in-person event, which is just going to be amazing. It's going to be in San Diego in May. I'm really excited about that. That'll be open to the public. But if you're an APC alumni or graduate and you've gone through the course, we're going to have some special things for those guys there. So, that's kind of the course in a nutshell. And if anyone's interested, obviously they can either reach out to you or they can reach out to me, and would be happy to kind of help guide them through that. Again, I don't do sales. So, people have messaged me before and they say, why should I take the course? And I'm always like, if you're passionate about the industry, I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to take anybody's money. And I've always said this. The reason why I don't push sales is because if I push somebody to buy something that they don't want to buy, now I'm indebted to them and there's an expectation I have to return something to them. And I never want to be in that position. Now, we've had incredible testimonies and people always find it valuable, but I want you to be part of our community because you want to be part of our community, not because I want you to be part of our community, right? And so, I know that was a lot, but that's kind of what I think about, when it comes to the APC course and community.
Yeah, great. Guys, as I mentioned before, highly recommend the course. Go check it out. Probably one of the best courses I've ever taken over my career. So go check it out.
Man, I really appreciate that. Honestly, and I know we're on our way out here, but things like that are amazing to me, man. Like I really do appreciate that. And it's moments like these, you're just like, man, that's so cool, because I'm just like every other coach. There's vulnerability that I have. There's insecurities that I have. When I built the course, there was this thought of, who am I? Like, am I good enough to do something like this? Do I deserve a platform where people would come and listen to me? And I don't know if the answer is yes. But so far it's been really cool, and it's been paying off. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. Coach, usually I finish off with 3 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am.
So first one, your favorite exercise in the weight room for yourself?
For myself, oh shoot! I thought you were asking about the players. Bench press.
All right. Second one, your favorite book about strength and conditioning?
My favorite book about strength and conditioning. Well, let me turn to my books here. I would say that my favorite book, very specific to strength and conditioning, the one that I'm diving into right now, I'll give a shameless plug. I'm reading actually a triathlon book, surprisingly. So I'll give a shameless plug to that. The science and application of sport for sure. But I think that the hard things, let me grab this book. This is coaching specific. It's called The Hard Things About the Hard Things. And it's a culture book that I think is very important. So from a culture side, I would say probably this, the one that I'm currently reading, Beyond the Triathlon book, Informed, The Art and Sciences, Paul Gamble's book. This is more of like, it's more abstract, I think, just his general thoughts about S&C. So this is a good one. So these two are ones that come to mind. And I think that for coaches, I think what I would say, I know it's supposed to be rapid fire, find ways to read things that aren't necessarily strength and conditioning related, but then pull that into strength and conditioning, because I think that that's very important.
Absolutely. Last one. One thing about strength and conditioning you would have known when you were 21.
That the weight room and your programs and coaching exercise are all a means to a higher end, which are create impact and teach life. And I always say this, it's so easy to make somebody strong. If you're listening and you want to make somebody strong, I'll tell you right now how to do it. Every week or two, add a change plate to the bar. Add a 2.5 or a 5-pound plate. And over time, they will get strong, I guarantee it. If you want to make them stronger in life, that's a much harder thing to do. And so I think buy into the ladder there and try to make people stronger in life and not just in your weight room.
That's a great message. Coach, where can our listeners find more about you, and where can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So I'm on, obviously, social media. On Twitter, it's just Dr. Ramsey Nijem. On Instagram, it's Dr. Ramsey Nijem. And then online at appliedperformancecoach.com.
All right. Thank you very much for being my guest today. It's been a great episode. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate you having me, and glad that we finally got a chance to do this.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You too.
What a great episode, guys. I had a lot of fun recording this episode with Dr. Nijem Ramsey. And as I said before, remember that you can find the link to the APC program in the description. And remember that you can find Sport Vitamins on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. I wish you guys a happy new year, and I'll see you in 2023 with some other episodes of Sport Vitamins. I'm out.